Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. If you could find a seat. I'm Geneva Overholzer. I'm the director of the USC Annenberg School of Journalism, and it's a delight for me to welcome you all here today. I wish I were welcoming even more of you. After we scheduled this wonderful event, the president of the university dared to schedule his annual speech, and it's also internship career day for students, and this little concern about getting jobs may be occupying some of them. In any case, we have a wonderful group with us here today for a very special occasion. I want to welcome all of you to the James L. Loper Lecture in Public Service Broadcasting. This is the 7th time we have presented the Loper Lecture at USC. Our previous speakers have included Mary Bitterman, former KQED president and CEO, Bill Kling, former president and CEO of American Public Media Group, WNET's president emeritus, Bill Baker, C-SPAN's chairman and CEO, Brian Lamb, Frontline's executive producer, David Fanning, and last year, Vivian Schiller, then of NPR, now chief digital officer for NBC News. I would like first to thank and recognize Mr. H. Russell Smith. Can you wave? Wonderful. Mr. Smith established the James L. Loper Lecture in Public Service and is the director emeritus and former president and chairman of the board of the Avery Dennison Corporation. He established this program at USC in tribute to a legendary leader in public service broadcasting, Dr. Jim Loper. So Jim is right here in the front row. Dr. Loper is a USC Annenberg alumnus. We're proud to claim you, a previous member of our faculty, and is here with his wife, Mary Lou, who was a longtime journalist at the Los Angeles Times, as many of you know. Please join me in welcoming honorary chair of the James L. Loper Lecture Series, Dr. Jim Loper and Mrs. Mary Lou Loper. I also want to take a moment to recognize some other special guests we have with us here today. Dick Block, president of Block Communications Group, Inc. Stan Chambers, retired Los Angeles television reporter. Here's Stan and his wife, Gigi. Frank Cruz, member of the USC Board of Trustees and USC Annenberg's Board of Counselors. Thank you for being with us. Frank, way to vote. Bill Davis, president and CEO of Southern California Public Radio, KPCC. Mickey Cantor, another member of USC Annenberg's Board of Counselors, and his wife, Heidi Schulman, a member of our adjunct faculty. And Mel Rogers, president and CEO of KOCE-TV Foundation and PBS SoCal, right here. Welcome to all of you. It's an honor to have you with us, and this is a very special occasion, which I'm now enjoying for my 4th year, and I'm delighted to be able to moderate today, especially because I have the great pleasure of introducing this year's Loper Lecturer, a person who has inspired so many of us journalists and who serves the public as a reliable and credible source at a time of great unsettlement, as I'm sure you would all agree. I first met Judy, although this is not something that Judy would possibly remember. More than 30 years ago, you were a White House correspondent for NBC News. I was a congressional fellow. And Judy came to speak to our group, and all of us were, as you can imagine, enthralled. Judy was gracious, smart, eloquent, knowledgeable, amazingly successful in our eyes, and truly, and extraordinarily generous in her encouragement of all of us. These personal traits that so struck us then have accompanied her through a remarkable career in broadcast journalism, from NBC to PBS to CNN, and now happily back, happily for us anyway, at PBS, where she regularly co-anchors the PBS NewsHour. Many of us remember Judy especially vividly for her 12 years as anchor and senior correspondent for CNN, where her political coverage seemed to shape an era. It certainly did in my mind. She has had such a broad impact. I have followed her in her generous support of her alma mater when my sister happened to be president of Duke. And she is a Duke trustee emerita. And I've often enjoyed encountering her, looking even more dazzlingly beautiful than she does every day, at the annual Gridiron Dinner in D.C. My husband, David Westfall, is a member of Gridiron, as is Judy. And last March, David invited Max and Nikki Nikias to be his guests at Gridiron, and I had the pleasure of introducing Max to Judy. Max not only being our president at USC, but also the proud papa of a broadcast journalist, went away beaming, as I think most people do when meeting Judy. Judy and her husband, Al Hunt, have a wonderful family of 3 children in D.C., and while raising this family and doing this extraordinary work, she has been a stalwart supporter of so many people and so many causes. Certainly young journalists, encouraging them as she encouraged us, although we were about the same age, I think, during that congressional fellowship encounter, and encouraging young people in general. I recall, as you may well, her project Generation Next, Speak Up, Be Heard, which led to 2 hour-long documentaries on young people's views. But I am especially struck and moved by her unflagging and courageous support of women, visible in countless ways, but particularly noteworthy in her leadership of the International Women's Media Foundation, of which she is the founding co-chair. As you can imagine, Judy has received scores of awards. I'll mention only my favorite, USC Journalism's own award for Distinguished Achievement in Journalism in 1987, the same year as Stan Chambers, along with Leslie Stahl and Jack Nilsson. We are delighted to have you back, Judy. Please join me in welcoming the remarkably generous and oh so capable Judy Woodruff.
Thank you, Geneva. Geneva is one of those just remarkable people we meet in life who, who not only is so outstanding in what she does, but she is personally, she's not only professionally admired, but personally admired. And I can't tell you how excited I was to see you come here and take on the responsibilities that you've had, and to add even more luster to the amazing program here at USC Annenberg. It's such a treat to be here. I'm looking outside thinking, why are we inside this room? Why can't we be out there enjoying amazing Southern California weather? Every time I come out here, I think, why do I want to go back to Washington? Where it's not nearly as nice, but it is an honor to be here. It's such an honor to have been asked to deliver this lecture named after Jim Loper. It's wonderful to meet you, Jim Loper, and to meet you, Mary Lou. Such a treat to meet Russell Smith just now, a few minutes ago, who of course was the benefactor for these lectures, to follow in the footsteps of just a remarkable group of individuals involved with public media. And I look around the room and I do see important faces in public broadcasting today. Mel Rogers, we didn't have a chance to say hello earlier, but I hope to get a chance to talk to you this afternoon. He, of course, is heading up SoCal Public Television, formerly KOCE. Which has stepped in to be the face and the voice of public broadcasting here in the broader Los Angeles area. But to look around the room and see so many friends, you already heard Heidi Schulman is here, my longtime friend, former NBC colleague who's on the faculty here, her husband, the incomparable Mickey Cantor. Judy Muller, where are you, Judy? Let's see, who else did I see a minute ago? Murray Fromson, it's just, the list goes on and on. This is an amazing place, and you are blessed with extraordinary talent. I'm really delighted to see those of you students who could make it today. As the mother of 3, 2 in their 20s and 1 who just turned 30. I completely appreciate your being there to try to talk to the recruiters today. The job prospects we know are not what they used to be, and so I endorse the choice for any student who's out there thinking about his or her future post-school. So I respect that and understand. But students who are here, it's great to see you, and I hope we have a chance to talk and spend some time talking together afterwards. I want to note that I have a family connection with this program. My husband, Al Hunt, who is the Washington executive editor for Bloomberg News, teaches a seminar course every spring at the other Annenberg, and that is at the University of Pennsylvania. So I feel that we're kind of all related and connected somehow. And I also want to tell you that my head has been very much lately in the presidential campaign, because I've been out there covering some of the caucuses and the primaries. I just came back from Florida covering their primary a few days ago. So if I start lapsing into how many counties Rick Santorum won in Missouri, or what the president's challenges are with regard to Catholic voters, please just bear with me. Now, I will tell you at the outset that I may be the first Loper lecturer to have tweeted about being here already twice, including late last night when I landed at LAX. But my message to you today, to get right to it, this is sort of a report from the front lines from the perspective of someone who loves being in my second tour at PBS. It's a simple message, and it is, it's not your father's public broadcasting anymore, and that's a good thing. Yes, absolutely, we are staying true to the core values that were at the heart of why public broadcasting was established in the first place. Newton Minow talked about it back in 1961 when he first found commercial broadcasting wanting, and he gave that memorable, in fact, iconic vast wasteland speech. President Lyndon Johnson nailed it when he signed the Public Broadcasting Act into law in 1967, and I'm quoting. He said, "It announces to the world that our nation wants more than just material wealth. Our nation wants more than a chicken in every pot. We in America have an appetite for excellence, too. While we work every day to produce new goods and to create new wealth, we want most of all to enrich man's spirit. That is the purpose of this act." 45 years later, that is still at the heart of what we do across public broadcasting, to educate, to inform, and to entertain. The goal is to make us all better citizens of the United States and of the world. It sounds very American, to make us all better citizens. It also sounds maybe a little grandiose, and if we sometimes fall short, which we clearly do, that's okay. But from a public affairs perspective, we want to remain the uniquely trusted and accessible source of news over the air that we have long been. That remains very important to who we are and what we offer. But we're also changing. We come to you in more than one dimension. The sea in which we swim has obviously changed. Commercial broadcasting is so much more than it used to be, offering so many more choices, a few of which are also uplifting. Great music, great drama, great science, great looks at history, and even great journalism. That's not the bulk of what commercial media offers, but there's enough of it to raise the bar for us. And I would argue we've met that bar with a consistent commitment to excellence, what President Johnson talked about when public broadcasting first came into being. But more important today, the world of communications and communications technology has changed, and it continues to change dramatically, faster than you can say iPad 3. Only the youngest among us can actually keep up with it. Radio, seeing its own changes, television, which I know better, has been knocked off balance by the internet and everything that is spun from the internet. Every day there's a report telling us about another device, another way to use the social media, and another report, like the one that came out just this week, telling us that young people are watching TV, including TV news, but they're watching it on every device other than a television set, in their own time and in their own order. They want to watch, if they want to watch stories from the bottom of the newscast to the top, that's the way they do it, no matter what a smart editor sitting in a newsroom somewhere decided. That's what the future looks like, and we in public broadcasting must adapt. We at PBS and the NewsHour are doing exactly that. And as a result, I think we are better at what we do. And I'll give you just a few statistics, and I actually have some copies of what we call our analytics, flashcard analytics that I'm going to hand out to any one of you who may be interested. I think I've got about 10 or 12 copies here. of what we at the PBS NewsHour are doing right now as of February this month, just to give you a small sense of how we're adapting. While we're holding our own with our television audience, about 1 million people a night, something like 12 million check us out over the course of every month, dipping in and out of the show. Pew's annual State of the Media report, which of course we pore over, all of us in the media, confirms that we are also making an impression online. For the last year and a half, we've had our own iPhone app downloaded well over 200,000 times. 50,000 people, more than that, like us on Facebook. We have over 236,000 followers on Twitter, well more than any of the other network evening news programs, which is kind of remarkable. Our widget that measured the amount of oil that spilled into the Gulf last summer after the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, the only thing of its kind, was widely picked up and used by journalists around the world. I could go on, but instead, as I said, I can hand out some copies of this with a few more specifics to any of you who are interested in the details. Having overhauled our entire news-gathering operation to focus at least as much attention on digital as we do on television, we're now using Skype to reach citizens in Syria and Libya who cannot safely come out of their homes, or Google Hangout to bring voters together from around the country to sit and watch and review the President's State of the Union address, which we did just a couple of weeks ago. We're using something called the Public Insight Network to find sources, again, in Syria who say they have been spied on by their own government. As my NewsHour colleague Hari Srinivasan puts it, and he's my pal who interprets all the latest digital developments for me, he said, we are crushing the distance barrier. This used to be a huge advantage that newspaper and radio reporters had over us in television because we have to lug a heavy camera, lighting equipment, sound equipment, wherever we go to interview our sources, whoever's giving us information. But now, with these kinds of technological and digital developments, we can even begin to even out the playing field. We can go to where these sources are even without physically being there ourselves with a camera, with the lights and the microphone. As a result, our stories are more textured, they're more nuanced, they're better sourced by the people who are living them. We're starting a Listen to Me campaign between now and the Democratic and Republican National Conventions this summer, we're trying to include journalism schools, like this one, if you're interested, high school students around the country, YouTube, public media partners, to find out what Americans care about. What do they want from their government? This is going to be a program or a facet of our program that will be part of what we do digitally and on the air. Now, having said all this, we know that what I'm talking about are tools. It's what we do with these tools that matters. How do we harness them to do the old-fashioned, shoe-leather reporting that is at the heart of who we are? That is our real challenge. As Jim Lehrer likes to say, and he has said it often, and I'm happy to quote him, when we wake up in the morning, we at the NewsHour don't have to figure out who we are and what kind of journalism we do, as so many others in our business may. When we get up, we know it's about providing honest, comprehensive, fair reporting and analysis of the most important stories of the day, and to do it in as transparent a way as possible. The only question we have is to work out what are the most important stories of that day, and how do we get them on the air? That's where we spend our time. Yes, the resources are shrinking, absolutely, for public broadcasting, and they are for the entire news spectrum. The economy has not been kind to journalism. Even before the financial collapse and the recession, we were already seeing a changing business model. Thousands of reporters losing their jobs all over this country in every form of media. In public broadcasting, we've had our own special set of challenges. We know there have been some changes in stations right here in the Los Angeles area. Our beloved KCET decided to go its own way to become independent. We're very fortunate that KOCE, PBS SoCal, was able to step in very quickly and fill in the gap for us with carrying public broadcasting programs, including the NewsHour. But again, more broadly, news organizations aren't covering all the news we should be covering. We don't have the resources we used to. And I'm not just talking about public television, public radio, NPR. I'm speaking here about NPR. I'm speaking about newspapers and across the board. We don't have the resources. We are being asked to do a lot more with a lot less, and that's a problem. And believe me, we are very focused at the NewsHour on how to fill the funding gap that we have along with everybody else. And by the way, I'll just mention again all those tools that I threw out a few minutes ago. They are helping us in some ways to cross the divide. If we can't get to a place to cover a story, can we get somebody to talk to us on Skype here in this country and not just overseas? Can we use something like a Google Hangout, which is just now coming into use, to interview voters in different parts of a state to get their views on the candidates? We're just beginning to learn how to use these kinds of technology. Meantime, we're focused on the work we do every single day, and I've never been prouder of my colleagues than I am right now, with Jim Lehrer stepping back, as I'm sure you've all have seen, stepping back, doing less on air. He remains the executive editor of the program, still involved very much, but deferring to the rest of the team to take on much of the broadcasting responsibilities. We've reconfigured the daily program in that way. And if I could just pat us on the back for a moment, forgive me, with the amazing talent of Margaret Warner and her team. She was in Egypt at the moment of the revolution. She has reported from Iraq and Afghanistan. Right now she's in Europe. Just yesterday, 2 days ago, she interviewed the Prime Minister of Italy about Europe's debt crisis. Ray Suarez, who's done reporting across the board on so many issues as part of our global health team, reporting on the air and online. He's been in Haiti, Peru, a number of countries in the African continent, and on and on. Jeffrey Brown and his team on air and online, reporting, covering the arts around the world. And here in the U.S., interviewing musicians and artists. Just this week, he talked to photographer Annie Leibovitz about her latest landscape work, and an extraordinary set of beats that they've put together in what they call the art beat, but they have something called the Daily Frame, which looks at photography, the latest in photographic work being done, and something else called the Weekly Poem. You know, they're covering poetry and music and across the board. And I have to say, I look at what we put online, and I have my MacBook Air with me if anybody wants to take a look at it after the program, just to give you a small taste of the kinds of things that our folks are doing. Yes, the resources are limited, but I think we're producing a lot given that. And of course, the incomparable Gwen Ifill, who moderates presidential debates and knows American politics like few others in this country. So yes, it's a time of challenge and it's a time of turmoil. I'm not going to diminish that. On our program, on public media, and across the board for all of us in communications, and that's going to continue. But you know, we don't have the option of just disappearing, of throwing up our hands in the air and saying, we can't do this, it's too expensive, it's too complicated, it's changing too fast. We don't have that option. The problems that we face, the challenges we face in this country and in the world today, never been more complicated, never been, in my view, tougher. And as Geneva suggested, I have been around for a long time. I started reporting back in the early 1970s when I covered the Georgia State Legislature, went on to cover the White House in the late 1970s and into the 80s. And yes, the world was complicated and challenging when we were in the middle of a Cold War, but I would argue it's a whole lot more difficult to understand today. So many more places on the planet we want to understand, so many more issues that we all know are important, from the environment to the economy, certainly, which is a huge issue for all of us going forward. What shape is our economy going to be? So on and on and on, the issues are enormous. We don't have the option. Those of us who care about informing the public, we don't have the option of just stepping out and stepping away. We have to keep at it. And fortunately, we love what we do. I know those of my colleagues at the NewsHour relish coming to work every day. As corny as that sounds, we know we've a lot of things still have to be worked out. We still make mistakes. We try to be as transparent as we possibly can be. But we bring an enthusiasm and a determination to get the story right and to serve the American people that I can promise you is not going to go away. So no, we are not your father's public television or my public television, even when I started out back at the McNeil-era NewsHour in 1983, before many of you students were even a glint in your parents' eye. But I would argue we are much more than that today, and we have never been more needed than we are today. Thank you very much, and I look forward to talking with Geneva.
Wonderful. Do you have a preference about where you sit?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. I'm trying to cover this one, so I'll switch. Thank you so much, Judy. Really interesting. And I know each of you would like very much to have a chance to ask Judy your questions, so I promise not to hog the time. But I want to talk a little about Santorum and how many counties he got in Missouri.
I had a feeling somehow
right?
it was going to come up.
Well, we get Washington visitors. We got to sort of... the campaign, obviously, consuming a lot of us. I'm sure you saw, and many of you saw in yesterday's New York Times, the story about the fact that it is cable news channels that are now the most prominent sources of campaign news for the American people. This was a Pew study. I don't know if you have thoughts about how that has come about or what effect it might have or how important it is, but I'd like to hear them.
Well, I think some of it is natural. This was a Pew study that looked at where people are getting. They look every year at where people are getting their information, and this year they especially looked at where people are getting their political election year news. And cable has been the sponsor of these 19 Republican primary debates.
19.
So they have developed quite a following in putting these debates together. In many states, they worked out an alliance with the Republican Party of that state, Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, I guess Florida had a couple of debates, and there are a few to come, but you're not going to see as many as we've had. But I think that relationship, that sponsorship of the debates, kind of cemented in people's minds the role. Is that me doing that, or I can't tell what it is? Maybe I'll pick the back of this up. I don't know if it's leaning on it that's causing this to make a noise, but I don't know if that's the source of it. I would suspect that it has a lot to do with it. And in fact, if you're following politics closely, and it has been a really interesting roller coaster of a Republican primary so far, and you want to know what's going on and you want to catch it in real time, and frankly, if you are of my generation, you're probably going to watch cable. The broadcast networks are not carrying primary election coverage during the day. If you want to tune it at any point, you're going to turn on one of the cable channels, CNN, Fox, MSNBC. But the difference is, I think, that with younger people, and I don't remember the exact numbers, but all the surveys show that for younger Americans, and I touched on this, they are getting a lot of their news online. I mean, most of their news online. They are getting it through Facebook, through their favorite website, Twitter, to a small degree, but it's growing, it's becoming. I was just saying when I came in here, it is now essential, if you're trying to follow the campaign, believe it or not, you have to be watching the Twitter feed, because the reporters who are with the candidates or at the debates or with voters often are tweeting immediately about what they see. It used to be you had to follow the wire services, and you still do. You still follow the wire services. AP, used to be UPI, but mainly it's the Associated Press. But the wire service can't be everywhere, and people tweeting are everywhere practically now. And these are journalists, they're ordinary people, but a lot of them are journalists, maybe they're bloggers, and that news is getting out there. Now, you're saying, okay, can we trust that? Is that credible? And that is another set of issues that we all have to deal with in news gathering. What are the sources of news we can trust? And we have to learn. I mean, there are names that are familiar to us. For example, I'll just throw one out who's a frequent tweeter. Mark Halperin, who writes for Time magazine and is a frequent commentator on MSNBC. A very respected guy, very knowledgeable in his coverage of the media. When I see one of Mark Halperin's tweets, I know, okay, I can believe this. And the same with some other folks I would name in the media and different news organizations. the cable channels have known, and I'll just say this and shut up and wrap up my answer to your question, Geneva. They know from previous elections that they can build their audience in an election year because the election becomes like an ongoing drama. It's like it starts the year before the election, the drama builds and it wanes and waxes and wanes, and the public gets involved. They're watching the personalities, they're watching the dirty advertising, the mudslinging, and they follow it like a great story. And the cable channels have learned that if they put a lot of that on the air, they can build their audience, and that's what they've done, and that's what they're doing. They've done it this year, and like I said, the different quotient this year and all of that was the use of the debates and lining up so many debates, which drew a pretty significant audience, and I think that's drawn them to cable. And so it's it's something that is very much a part of the political landscape this year.
Well, it's been a hell of a story this year. I mean, the election has been like a compelling serial. We never knew what was coming next. Would you ever have predicted that Santorum would have snagged these last three?
Well, I was asked that question just a few minutes ago, and I think most of us expected Santorum to win Missouri, which is kind of a beauty contest, no delegates awarded. We expected him to do well in the Minnesota caucuses. The Republican Party in Minnesota has a very heavily social conservative component, and we expected them to do a lot of organizing. We expected Santorum to do well. The big surprise was Colorado, because Mitt Romney won Colorado 4 years ago, and the fact that Santorum, who, even though he won in Iowa, didn't get any credit for it until very late in the game. It was all the way into post-South Carolina.
It wasn't by a landslide.
It wasn't by a landslide. No, it was only 20 or 30 votes. But he didn't get the lift that he would have gotten had he only won by even a few votes.
Would have made a real difference.
I think it would have made a difference. The media coverage, even by a few votes, would have been different coming out of Iowa, and I think it would have made a difference. But consequently, he couldn't raise as much money, and it's the cycle. You do well, you win, you raise money, you can run in the next state, and on, and then you do well, and so on. The real challenge today is for Mitt Romney, who has been running for 5 years. He's been running, never really stopped running after the 2008 race. I mean, he stopped momentarily when John McCain was the nominee, but from everything we can tell, he intended to run all along. He's organized in all 50 states. He's got the entire establishment of the Republican Party behind him. He's got more members of Congress, and governors endorsing him, and still there is this big component of the Republican electorate who are conservative and who just aren't ready to go along with Mitt Romney. They're not comfortable with him yet. And that's what makes this story so fascinating now.
They seem to be on an endless quest for somebody other than Romney.
Right, and it was Michelle Bachmann, it was Rick Perry, it was Herman Cain. I'm leaving somebody out. And it was Newt originally, and Newt faded, and Newt came back, and now Newt's faded again. And who knows who it'll be.
You never know about Newt.
But the numbers are shrinking. I mean, I think that Santorum now shows that he may have some staying power. We'll see.
Well, I had a bunch of questions about the changes in journalism, which you eloquently answered. So I'm going to be in an act of great generosity.
Don't tell me that I answered all your questions. Well, no, that is not possible.
Nobody would answer all my questions. But I do want to share you with the audience. So may I ask each of you to wait for a microphone to be brought to you. And then, why don't you tell us who you are? And there you go. We'll start us off.
Hi. My name is Udita Srimushtam. I'm a student in the master's program at Annenberg in Communication Management. And I had a question about some of the rhetoric that's been going on during this election cycle. Recently, I saw on Facebook that a man, Hoekstra, who's running in Michigan, ran a blatantly racist ad that was very
Peter Hoekstra,
very anti-Asian. And we've seen a lot of rhetoric that's been sexist, that's been anti-immigrant, that's been somewhat racist. And I was wondering why you think that's become much more prevalent, in my opinion, in this election than perhaps in elections past.
I think I'm familiar with the Hoekstra example, and I know there have been some other isolated examples. I would actually argue it's not as much as it used to be. I think politicians in this country at one point were able to get away with a lot more sexist, racist. I mean, I think back to campaigns I've covered in the South, the North Carolina governor's races, which Geneva is, I'm sure, familiar with, where race was just right out in the open. We all remember the Willie Horton ad that was used against Governor Dukakis by President George H.W. Bush. So, I mean, I would say it's still there, it still exists, and members of Congress and candidates slip over the line all the time, but I think we are doing better than we used to. You do bring up something that I think, I mean, to me is a pet concern right now, and that is what's happened to women in politics. Because, women, 1992, 94, 92 was supposed to be the year of the woman in American politics, because there were so many women who ran and were elected to Congress. But since then, the numbers have really tapered off. Women are dropping out. There aren't as many women who have said they're going to run. There's a little bit of a turnaround this year. But I think it really does raise questions about the environment and whether it's hospitable for women. Raising money has been harder for women. We know women are held to a different standard just by virtue of the fact that they're female. But this is something that I think all of us, men and women, should keep an eye on. We want a Congress, we want a leadership in this country that looks like the rest of America. Congress should be like holding up a mirror to the country. But right now, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's only I've got to get this right, I think only 23% of Congress, 23% of Congress is women, whereas 50% of our electorate, 52% of the population is female. Where are those others? And the same, of course, with minorities, with Hispanics, who I think are greatly underrepresented in the Congress, African Americans, and on and on. So, those are some issues. But I appreciate the question. I think it's clear that some people have stepped over the line this year. And the good news is that when it gets picked up, it becomes part of the conversation. And usually the person who's done it ends up having to quickly apologize and, take it back. So I hope I answered your question.
Over here.
Hello, I'm Logan Healy. I'm a broadcast journalism major here at Annenberg. And I just wanted to ask you what the most exciting story you've ever covered was, and maybe explain a little bit about the process.
Wow, there's so many to choose from, and as you've heard, I've been doing it a long time. Probably for me as a political reporter, the most exciting, unbelievable night was the 2000 presidential election. I was on the air for CNN as an anchor along with Bernie Shaw and a few other people, and of course, infamously, that was the night when all the networks got it wrong, when everybody, we call Florida one way, then we call Florida another way, and then we called the national election, and we went on for the next 37, 38 days with an unresolved outcome. I had never seen anything like it. No one in our business had ever seen anything like it. I think it really did cause some soul searching in the news media, because we were so dependent on those so-called exit polls, these interviews with voters as they leave the polling places. And we had put so much stock in them, even though we knew that they aren't perfect. We know they're more reliable than just typical polling, which has gotten better and better. The most trusted polling organizations are now better than they've ever been. They really do a good job. And by the way, not all polling organizations are alike. Some of them are you can count on, some of them less so. But the exit polls were supposed to be, because it's with more voters, you're catching a larger sort of basket of people. They're supposed to be more accurate. But that was a bad one, and it had to do with an erroneous model that the folks putting the exit, I won't, getting into all the details, put the exit poll results together used, and we all fell prey to that. I hope we learned some lessons from that. I think we're all more careful now about calling races, but we still need to be cautious. I mean, I have to tell you, I'm old-fashioned enough that even though I'm fascinated with exit polls and polling in general, I think we have to be really careful not to let polling drive us too much. We are so accustomed to reading the polls and saying, well, aha, if the polls say this, this, and this, then that's where we should direct our resources. We should definitely make sure that the front runner, Mitt Romney, has 2 crews with him, and that the next in line, Newt Gingrich, has a crew with him, and we don't really have enough crews to cover Rick Santorum and Ron Paul, except when they go into a big city where we happen to have a crew that's already based there. I mean, we make coverage decisions based on polling because we don't have another source. So I wish we didn't have to do that, but scarcer and scarcer the resources are, the more we have to do that. And I realize I'm moving farther afield from your question originally. My hope is on election nights, whether it's primaries, caucuses, or come November the 8th of this year, that we are cautious. I mean, what is the rush? I have some friends in this business who would say it's all about being first. Yes, they want to be right, but it's all about being first, and I respect that. But to me, it's not nearly so important as getting it right. And that's what we have to keep in mind, for sure.
Just real quickly, what's the most exciting story you've covered? Do you work with ATVN?
No, I just started with Annenberg Radio News.
Oh, great. Good.
But in high school, I did a story on AP testing at my high school and how our number of tests we were taking was increasing, but our scores were pretty bad. And it actually got us on Newsweek's list, and we thought that was part of the district's kind of, because they were making requirements and stuff like that. It was really cool, kind of investigating.
So you were part of that reporting?
I was the only person on it.
Whoa! Congratulations! Good for you. Bring those skills into journalism. Fabulous. That's great.
We have time for one more question, I think. Maybe two more, yeah, depending on how quickly we go. Let's see, can we get Murray a mic here?
Judy, you and I have been covering politics for a long time.
Hi.
How are we going to get rid of this threat to democracy, this overflow of money, how it's poisoning the whole approach we should be involved in selecting presidents and elective officers? It's really embarrassing.
Well,
and a threat.
I think until we see a different makeup of the United States Supreme Court, that's not going to change. We know the reason we have these gigantic contributions this year well, it was just to the Republicans until the president announced the other night that he's going to accept the so-called super PAC money as well. But it's a Supreme Court ruling. It was a close decision, but majority rules, 5-4. And I think unless the court has a change of heart, that's the way it's going to be. I think to me, it's not only the millions and millions of dollars that now corporations and individuals can write, it's just the ongoing sea of money that we're swimming in Washington. It's everywhere. It's K Street. It's K Street. That's the nickname for the street where so many lobbyists and influencers have offices in Washington. And I'm always careful when I talk about lobbying because, lobbying at its core is an honorable thing. It's informing members of Congress about issues. Not every member of Congress has the time or the wherewithal to be able to know everything he or she needs to know about an issue to understand. So lobbyists bring points of view from the AARP and from the Children's Defense Fund all the way to oil company interests and everything in between, including public broadcasting. Lobbyists play an important role in the way our government works. But the problem with the money is that when it begins to drive the result, when the money gets bigger than the issue, bigger than the story, and if you're a politician and in order to get reelected, you've got to be up on the air and television. I mean, look at what Mitt Romney was able to accomplish in Florida. He was able to bury Newt Gingrich because he outspent him 5-1, at least 5-1 in Florida. Coming off of Gingrich's really impressive win in South Carolina, Romney just completely obliterated him in television advertising. And it's great for the commercial television stations that carry these spots. They do very well, thank you, with those ads. And I don't think they're interested in changing the system. But the system, it's gotten out of whack. And since the court ruled 2 years ago, it's now been 2 years. I don't see a turnaround. I think it's here to stay. I think there may be some efforts to increase the transparency, but honestly, at the end of the day, if the court interprets interprets the Constitution as speech equaling money, money equaling speech, then I don't see how we turn that around.
So we'll
Maybe
go
one
with
other
this
question.
one last
Yeah,
question.
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. My name is Rita Loria. I am adjunct in Annenberg. Can you hear me?
Hi, I think
Hi.
so. Speak up a little
I
bit.
am
louder.
adjunct in Annenberg as well as a practicing attorney. I have a question. My area is new media and the law. I would like to know regarding how you view these tools of change that we are using, especially as they relate to our democracy and the ability that they have potentially to stymie our representative government. In other words, have you experienced in being out in the field working constantly, seeing how Twitter, how fast the information flow is able to be rendered and the transmission of it to a global audience? Do you see a negative potential, not just merely a positive potential for our tools of change?
I think it's a very good question, and I think we're only beginning to understand what Twitter and these other social media phenomena can mean for our democracy, for journalism in the first place, and then for our democracy more broadly. Certainly we've come a long way since Tiananmen Square, when people were, we didn't even have cell phones at that point, but the word was getting out through just raw reporting on television. There was a satellite communication that was able to get the word out to the rest of the world. We have come so far from that. Today, you can be in Tahrir Square tweeting, and unless the government shuts it down, which of course is what the Egyptian government started to do, and then in Syria, where they completely have shut down the use of the internet. They monitor the internet. They're monitoring cell phone communications. Only people with satellite phones can communicate. I think we're really only beginning to understand. I mean, certainly if it's such a great force for good in that people can come together, and if you believe democracy is the best form of government on earth, which I think most of us believe, then is the purest form of democracy the best form of government on earth, where people rule no matter what, and where there is no clear leadership, and where everything has to be done by consensus. I mean, I would argue that gets a little more complicated, and that's the subject of a great political science, 10 or 12 political science seminars. So I think it's something for us clearly to keep in mind. I mean, we've seen it at a small level where in some communities around the country, people have used Twitter to sort of instantly form a crowd to protest something or another, and the police have gotten upset about this and have clamped down, arguing that if that's in that case, it's a force for ill rather than for good. So we will continue to watch it. I mean, it's still new enough so that I think we appreciate the technology of it, and we appreciate what it can mean, but we also know that, like everything else, television is not purely good in its most extended form. Radio, I mean, all of these things can be used for bad purposes as well as good, and I would say certainly that's the case with Facebook, Twitter, and all the rest of these things, no matter how exciting they seem in the first place. But all the more reason why we need to be vigilant and watch and see where they go. Thank you very much. This has just been such an honor for me to be here. Thank you, Janine.
Wonderful having you.
Thank you.
So I now have 3 delightful duties. The first is to officially thank, I know on Jem's behalf and mine, you for your wonderfully vibrant and engaging and thoughtful presence. It's really been delightful. I know that everybody here agrees. You're just a huge treat.
Thank you.
The second is that after I say the third, I want you all to join us for a dessert reception over here. And I know that Judy especially would love to speak with those of our students who are here, although I'm sure she won't reject any of you. But the third one...
Nobody will be rejected.
Nobody will.